G'day, it's fugitive Australian journalist Shane Dowling from the website kangaroocourtofaustralia.com. Now, former Prime Minister Scott Morrison has started promoting his latest fraud scheme, which is selling a book which will be full of lies. And I know it'll be full of lies because if he told the truth, he'd end up in jail. It's going to be about his time as Prime Minister, but from a Christianity viewpoint, which is another lie. He's not a Christian at all. That's a big fraud he runs. He did that when he was a politician, well, still a politician, but to become a politician, if you claim you're a Christian, you can show up to church. You've got all these people there that'll donate to your election campaign. They'll act as volunteers. So for people who want to become a politician, becoming a fraudulent Christian can be very helpful. And that's what Scott Morrison did. He hasn't got a Christian bone in his body. Neither does his wife. She's a Bonnie and Clyde. They run a Bonnie and Clyde routine. But anyhow, let's have a look at the book, which is his latest fraud scheme. But it's worth noting I've written an article and 2 videos over the last week and a half in relation to Scott Morrison trying to rehabilitate his reputation, which has obviously been trashed while he was Prime Minister, all the lies he told, all the fraud. And also since he lost the Prime Ministership, he has been exposed by the Robo-Debt Royal Commission for being a fraudster as well. But let's just have a quick look at the background, then I'll read you out some of what's been written in relation to the latest fraud scheme, the book. Now, just briefly, on Friday the 8th of September, Andrew Green from the ABC wrote an article. Scott Morrison says Anthony Albanese shouldn't rush to visit Beijing this year. Well, that article was really nothing more but a puff piece to try and rejuvenate Scott Morrison's reputation. It relates to Scott Morrison dribbling on at a party room meeting in Canberra while the Parliament was sitting on Friday the 8th of September. Then a week later, the 15th of September, the Sydney Morning Herald wrote an article, similar thing, but this time Morrison backing Voice No campaigner Mundine for Liberal Senate spot, sources say. Well, once again, there was a puff piece which was derived from apparently the party room meeting on the Friday in Canberra, quoting other politicians saying what Scott Morrison apparently told other politicians and how they respect his, or implies they respect his opinion. They don't. He's a running joke in Canberra and everyone knows it, including the Liberal Party and the National Party. And on the 10th of September, I wrote an article in relation to the ABC story that was published on the 8th of September. My article is former Prime Minister Scott Morrison leaked story to the ABC to promote himself again. And I was pretty well spot on the money because he did that a few days later again with the SMH, the Sydney Morning Herald. And my argument in the 2 videos in the article was that Scott Morrison is manipulating the media or colluding with the media, the whole media colluding with him to rehabilitate his reputation. And I published a video yesterday, a second video on that. Then lo and behold, last night, it started popping up everywhere that Scott Morrison is publishing his new book, his new fraud scheme. And the Sydney Morning Herald gave that a good run too, but it popped up in other media, News Corp and SBS, etc., and Channel 9. So obviously either the book publisher or Scott Morrison has put out a press release. So those 2 other articles over the last week and a half by the ABC and also SMH trying to rehabilitate Scott Morrison's reputation was obviously planned to some degree to help promote the book, to rehabilitate his reputation a bit. So when the book press release comes out, it's not looking so dodgy. Now, News Corp say on their website, the title is in relation to the book. Last night, Monday the 18th of September, Scott Morrison has revealed plans to write a new book. And it says Scott Morrison will pen his account of cancel culture and identity politics in a religious memoir scheduled for mid-2024. Well, he's talking about cancel culture and identity politics. It sounds like he's going to try and play the victim to some degree. Oh, they tried to cancel me. You'll say that in relation to the Robo-Debt Royal Commission. Well, he's a crook. He's a criminal. It's going to be full of lies, that book. But let's have a look at the Sydney Morning Herald said. They gave it front page publicity on their website and also on their paper today. Scott Morrison writing the new book. And the article was actually written by James Masala. He wrote that puff piece a few days ago, and he's written a few puff pieces over the year for Scott Morrison. He's obviously a puppet or a colluder with Scott Morrison, helping him, aiding and abetting him with his crimes. And it was also written by Hamish Hastie. I've never heard of him. And their article's titled Spreading the Word, Scott Morrison Eyes Booming Christian Book Market. And it starts off, former Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the book he is writing about his religious faith will be marketed to Christians in Australia, the United States and around the world. And he's promised the book, which will be published on May 21st, 2024, will be quite unlike any other book written by a Prime Minister. Now, that date is pretty interesting, May 21st, 2024, because that'll be 2 years to the day of the election defeat on May 22nd, 2022. And the book goes on, the article goes on to say the 288-page book, Plans for Your Good, a Prime Minister's testimony of God's faithfulness, is to be published by Thomas Nelson, a division of HarperCollins Christian Publishing, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, so it's probably a bribe, a payback to some degree. The article goes on to say Morrison confirmed the book would be marketed in the booming US religious publishing market, where sales of religious books reach 757 million US, which is 1.175 billion Australian in 2022, after a 15% sales surge between 2019 to 2021. The publisher's weekly credited to the pandemic. And it quotes Morrison as saying, "It's been written with a broader audience in mind," Morrison said. "It hasn't been written to be available only in bookshops in Canberra, particularly in the US, but beyond that too." Well, if he's targeting the US, he might get done for wire fraud. Selling a fake book full of lies. That's wire fraud, especially if he sells the e-books to the US. Now, Scott Morrison has been a so-called Pentecostal Christian for quite a few years, but that's really a fraud scheme. That's a multi-level marketing Ponzi scheme type of fraud scheme. Hillsong. He's not part of Hillsong. His Pentecostal church is a different one, but he's obviously helped promote Hillsong in his good mate, and Brian Houston, who covered up his father's rape of children, good mate of his. So Scott Morrison's crimes know no bound. He'll do anything and everything for a buck. Selling a book full of lies about his time as Prime Minister and about his so-called Christianity, which is a lie. Well, that's just another fraud scheme for him, another fraud scheme to make another dollar, rip off the public. And I'd like to see the US to charge him for wire fraud, selling a fake book full of lies. And I'll keep on following up on this because it's another crime. The journalist promoting this so-called book should be writing about how he's a fraudster or a scammer and he's a fake Christian. That's what they should be writing. Yes, he's publishing another book, but it's going to be full of lies if he's claiming to be a Christian still. And it's going to have to be full of lies about his time as Prime Minister. Otherwise, he's going to be admitting to crimes. So the rebranding of Scott Morrison has moved fairly quickly over the last week and a half. But it's obviously been planned. They didn't call him Scotty for marketing for nothing. He's obviously been working on this for quite a few months. And Kangaroo Court of Australia is independent media. I publish a website and a YouTube channel, and I'm 100% crowdfunded from viewers like yourself. And I currently have 323 patrons donating $2,120 a month. And I really need to double it to become financially viable. So if you could support that, it'd be greatly appreciated. You can donate any amount, $3, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30, $40, $50 a month, whatever suits your budget. It all helps out in a big way. And the link for the Patreon account is below this video on YouTube and on my website. And please share this video on social media. Thank you for your time and have a good day.